Did pornography really lead Ted Bundy to murder? Ted Bundy was born on November 24, 1946 in Vermont. For the first 5 years of his life, he was told his grandparents were his parents. They did this to hide the fact that his mother had had him out of wedlock. When he was 5, his mother, whom he knew as his sister, moved with him across the United States to Tacoma, Washington. She married Johnny Bundy and had 4 more children. In Ted Bundy's last interview with James Dobson, the night before he was executed, he said, "I grew up in a wonderful home with 2 dedicated and loving parents. As one of 5 brothers and sisters, we as children were the focus of my parents' lives. We regularly attended church. My parents did not drink, smoke, or gamble. There was no physical abuse or fighting in the home. I'm not saying it was Leave It to Beaver, but it was a fine, solid Christian home. I hope no one will try to take the easy way out of this and accuse my family of contributing to this. I know, and I am trying to tell you as honestly as I know how, what happened." There are a lot of differing arguments about this statement. Others have claimed he was a disturbed child with an abusive childhood. Ultimately, Ted Bundy grew to be one of the most notorious serial killers in the 20th century, killing at least 30 known women, but suspected of killing over 100. Nobody knows exactly when he started to kill. People magazine wrote an article that stated, his earliest identified victim was murdered January 31st, 1974 in Washington. In that state, Bundy claimed 11 victims, 1 in California, 2 each in Oregon and in Idaho, 3 each in Colorado and Florida, and 8 in Utah. Ted Bundy was very suave. He would lure his victims in broad daylight into his car by using fake casts, crutches, and sometimes he'd pretend to be a cop investigating a crime. After he got them in his car, he would take them away to wherever he had previously planned to carry out his diabolical fantasies. He was caught for the first time in August 1975. The police in Utah stopped him for a routine traffic violation. Ted became suspicious to the police when he tried to get away with his headlights off. When they searched his car, they found handcuffs, an ice pick, a crowbar, pantyhose with the eye holes cut out, along with other questionable items. They arrested him on suspicion of burglary and traced him to his victim, Carol Duranch. She was fortunate enough to get away and be able to identify him in a police lineup. He was charged in Utah and transferred to Colorado for trial there. Ted Bundy waived legal counsel so that he could represent himself. This allowed him to go between the courtroom and the courtroom library unshackled. He ended up jumping out of the library window and escaping. They caught him a week later driving a stolen car. From this jail cell in Colorado, Ted Bundy was able to squeeze through a hole made for a light fixture in the ceiling of his cell. He crawled through the ceiling where he dropped down in the jailer's apartment, stole some of his clothes, and walked out of the front door undeterred. He traveled across the country where he continued his killing spree in Florida. There, he committed his final 3 murders that ended with a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach. He was caught again at a random traffic stop in a stolen car a few days after they found Kimberly's decomposing body. What caused him to ultimately carry out his first rape and then murder? In that same interview, Ted Bundy said pornography was an attributing factor. He started with softcore porn he found in a local drugstore, but occasionally would come across hardcore porn in dumpsters or garbage cans. He alluded that the most damaging pornography is when you start to view sexual violence. It is the marriage of pornography and sexual violence.
Those of us who have been so much influenced by violence in the media, in particular pornographic violence, are not some kinds of inherent monsters. We are your sons and we are your husbands. And we grew up in regular families. And pornography can reach out and snatch a kid out of any house today. It snatched me out of my home 20, 30 years ago. And as diligent as my parents were, and they were diligent in protecting their children, and as good a Christian home as we had, and we had a wonderful Christian home, there is no protection against the kinds of influences that are loose in the society that tolerates. Well, in the beginning, it fuels this kind of thought process. then at a certain time it's instrumental in what I would say crystallizing it, making it into something which is almost like a separate entity inside. And at that point you're at the verge, or I was at the verge of acting out on these kinds of things.
Now I really want to understand that. You had gone about as far as you could go in your own fantasy life with printed material, and you made or printed and video or
film, magazines, what have you.
And then there was the urge to take that little step, a big step, over to a physical event.
And it happens. It happened in stages, gradually. It doesn't necessarily, not to me at least, happen overnight. My experience with, I'd say, pornography generally, but with pornography that deals on a violent level with sexuality, is that once you become addicted to it, and I look at this as a kind of addiction, like other kinds of addiction, I would keep looking for more potent, more explicit, more graphic kinds of material. Like an addiction, you keep craving something which is harder, something which gives you a greater sense of excitement, until you reach the point where the pornography only goes so far. You reach that jumping off point where you begin to wonder if maybe actually doing it will give you that which is beyond just reading about it or looking at it.
Ted Bundy told James Dobson that he was a normal guy with a dark secret. Society has moved so quickly, especially with the internet. We can have access to any kind of porn at any time, anywhere. Fight the New Drug movement started in 2009 by a group of college kids. It uses scientific research to claim that pornography affects your brain the same way a drug does. It changes your brain to crave harder, more potent pornography to become stimulated, which then the user searches for, just like an addiction.
Listen, I'm no social scientist, and I haven't done a survey. I mean, I don't pretend that I know what John Q. Citizen thinks about this. But I've lived in prison for a long time now. And I've met a lot of men who were motivated to commit violence just like me. And without exception, every one of them was deeply involved in pornography, without question, without exception, deeply influenced and consumed by an addiction to pornography. There's no question about it. The FBI's own study on serial homicide shows that the most common interest among serial killers is pornography.
Considering Ted Bundy made this statement 30 years ago, and since that time the internet has changed our whole world, it has also changed how we view pornography. Pornography itself has also changed throughout this time. We can view any type of pornography wanted from any smart device connected to the World Wide Web, including even more deviant forms of pornography than Ted Bundy himself was addicted to. Because of this, his statement is very valid today. Ted Bundy granted James Dobson his final interview because he wanted to talk specifically about the role media violence and violent hardcore pornography had played in his killing spree. James Dobson was known for fighting against pornography and promoting Christian family values. Ted Bundy felt the mainstream media would not report this for him. Right after this interview was shared with the public, there was a lot of media backlash saying this was another one of Ted Bundy's suave cons. His final con to blame something as harmless as pornography on his sickening choices. Did pornography influence Ted Bundy to become a serial rapist and killer?